I don't subscribe to the ideology that great founders can make anything work. I think that's like more of a Twitter speak to just get people riled up. But I haven't seen that actually working in practice. So the market must be there and the tailwind must be there for the founder to succeed.
Hello, and welcome back to Off to the Valley, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of entrepreneurs who are shaping industries and redefining success. I'm your host, Pratik Panda, and today we have a truly inspiring guest, Palash Soni, the co founder and CEO of Goldcast. Goldcast is an AI powered B2B video campaign platform that is transforming the marketing landscape by putting video and events at the heart of the customer journey. Leading enterprise marketers from companies like Zuora, Mailchimp, and many others rely on Goldcast to amplify brand authority, create engaging content, and boost their marketing strategies. So Palash's journey started at a very early age, and we were chatting a little while ago, and how he's also started this company when he was in college. But some of his entrepreneurial stints started much earlier, and we'll talk a little bit about that when he was still a kid. But it's exciting to have Palash here with us. His story is one of relentless ambition and a clear vision for the future of marketing. Palash, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, and there is so much I want to talk to you about.
Thanks, Pratik. I'm very excited to be here.
Great. So tell me about this, right? In some research that we did, the entrepreneurial bug bit you pretty early. Tell me about your childhood days and how you decided to make money off of your friends.
Yeah, Pratik. So I was born and brought up in India, which I guess my accent tells that. I was in the central part of India, in MP, in a very small town, you not even call it a city. And so that's where I was born. And then around like 99, that year, when I was I was 10 years old, I got hands on a video game consoles. That was like 8-bit, consoles that I somehow found. And I thought, okay, this looks like a great opportunity because no one has it here. No one has seen it here. And I got it luckily from someone. So I said, okay, let's make a business out of it. So I used to lend it for lend playtime, not the console itself, for like 1 rupees for 15 minutes. That's 1 rupees is probably like a hundredth of a cent right now. So that was my first business venture. That made me realize that I really like the art of, providing value and building a business from there. And I think that some of that comes from the DNA of my family, although there's no, like my mom and dad both are not businessmen, but my mom is very entrepreneurial. She tried a bunch of things in her life while she was a stay-at-home mom. I think that comes from that.
That is amazing and such an interesting story. I remember my childhood days from India as well, where I would be the one paying to use some behavior because we used to go to a lot of these video game parlors back then because consoles were expensive. It was just a lot more economical to go to play for an hour or two and, pretty cheap that way. So tell me a little bit about Goldcast also, right? You were studying at Harvard. What happened? How did Goldcast happen?
Yeah, definitely, Pratik. So I came to HPS to start up. That I think is not why people come to business school generally. Before business school, I had almost completed 7 years of work experience. So it was not like a very obvious choice for me to go to B school. I was a PM at an ad tech company out of India called InMobi. It's pretty big, not super well known in the US, but pretty big. In that experience, I learned that it is very hard to build a software business that is at the cutting edge of the technology landscape while you are like 12 hours removed from your customer. Something similar to what we were talking about, right? You have to make so many trips. So that motivated me to think about, okay, if I really have to do it, then I should be in the market. And the ship had sailed for MS by then. So I was like, okay, MBA is the only option. I don't want to get stuck with my company on their visa. So let me come for an MBA. And the founder of that company, the CEO, was an alum of HBS. He wrote a recommendation. That's how I ended up at HBS, but with a very single-minded intent that I wanted to start up. So I met one of my co-founders, Kishore, a few months before business school in the context of business school, because only 30, 35 people go to HBS every year from India. So they get to know each other before. And we both shared this common interest that we wanted to start up. So my first year was actually spent largely like exploring everything under the sun. So I explored definitely SaaS because that was familiar, the software landscape, but I explored everything from blockchain, the pre Web3 world, I explored like cannabis business, anything, right? Deep tech, everything. And then finally arrived at Goldcast by the time the first year was ending. So that's how we ended up here. It was almost like a methodical exploration of ideas. And we had a lot of learning while exploring those ideas as to like what kind of ideas should we look for.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into this, right? Because in my
Yes.
past also, two out of my last three companies were when I was still in either engineering school or B school. And I want to know your thoughts and opinion on whether that's really a good time to do a startup. HBS is an intense program.
It is.
Even when I recall my business school days, those were intense. Like it's a
Yes.
lot to pop with the curriculum itself.
True.
In your recommendation for all the people who are listening, what do you suggest people do if they're still in school and wanting to do a startup? What do you prioritize and how?
Yeah, great question, Pratik. So a couple of points come to mind. One is that, yes, HBS was very intense for sure. It became more intense for the average student because not only just the curriculum, but also the constant like socialization that happens in the first year, right? So because I was very intentional that I wanted to start up, I was cutting corners in both areas, right? I was not the best student in the class. I was socializing a lot and I have made a lot of great friends there, but not as much as the average student. And I think that whoever I saw in business school who was intentional, who was actually making those sacrifices, were the ones who ended up with a real startup. Because there were a lot of people who had the general ambition to start up, but it did not probably show up as much in the actions. So having very strong intentionality and then actually making those trade-offs is important. But I think MBA is a great place to start up. I think it probably gets a little bit of a bad rap for whatever reason. But as we were discussing, right, you meet so many great people
Yeah.
with very different thoughts and backgrounds. It's the best time to find co-founder. It's also probably the only time you get as an adult, like professional who has work experience to have just the freedom to explore whatever, right? You don't have job pressure. You can just like the world is your oyster of sorts. So I think it was a very great place to start up.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, in my experience also, I feel like, I think a few years ago, I wrote a blog on why, like, when you are in school, whether it's undergrad or grad school, doesn't matter. While you're still in school, it's one of the best time to, toy around with startup ideas
Yeah.
and take it to a point where you might get serious about it as you're about to end your education. Let's talk a little bit about money also. And I know that's a sensitive
Yes.
topic, but the reason I'm asking you this also is schools and a lot of engineering schools and so many other, education programs have gotten a lot more expensive over time. So
Yes.
when I have interviewed a lot of people who want to do a startup, one of the top reasons for what's stopping them is usually an education loan. In your experience, was that a barrier for you? Do you have any sort of tips or some examples that you can share on how to sort of navigate that?
Great question, Pratik. And this is actually one of the reasons that a lot of students probably don't do it, or it just increases the stakes, the risk, especially for immigrants. So because I was an immigrant student, my comp before coming to B school was like nothing, right? So I had no reasonable savings as such. The good thing, and this is also dependent on the school, Harvard has very good scholarships. So I almost got 50% of my entire tuition plus stay fee. So I think the first year of HBS is I had my wife here. I had a kid at the end of the first semester. So my
Oh,
expenses
wow.
were probably projected to be like 137K, of which I got, I think, a scholarship of almost 74 or 75. So
That's amazing.
I still had a sizable loan of like $68,000. So that matters a lot, right? How much do you have, what your previous financial situation is, how much you have put in. What it does do is that it probably is a significantly harder to build a bootstrap startup, right? Where you're probably not paying yourself for the first 1 and 2 years. And so most founders I have seen who have gone on, especially if you're an immigrant, they have raised venture money. The venture capital landscape has become significantly more friendly with founders drawing salary. I think there was a time when the VCs expected founders to just like take it in
Yeah.
and be super hardcore. Not anymore, right? If you have to pay your loans and live a livable life, you have to pay yourself some comp. And so when you raise money, that's understood that you'll be paying yourself some salary. So yeah, I still found it honestly hard to pay loans till we were like a seed stage. Company had raised almost 10, 11 million because the comp was still not enough. It was like 5 figures, right? So it was still not enough to be like live a super comfortable life, but it was not bad. Like I couldn't complain.
Great. Are you aware of any programs that provide some sort of relief or assistance if people are opting for an entrepreneurial path?
Yes, great question, Pratik. So a lot of schools have that actually. So Harvard, for example, if I had fully graduated right after 2 years, then I would have gotten some loan relief, which they have for people who are starting up or are joining nonprofit. So they do have it. They are also very flexible in terms of just like being a little flexible on loans. So for example, I defaulted on my first 5 payments because we were not able to draw comp at that time. My credit score went for a toss, but I was able to call them and say, hey, I was starting up and this is my case. And they took that off.
That's amazing.
It's very good. Lots of schools are very flexible, especially in the US when you are starting up. It's just probably not as apparent, but if you try to find your way, you will find something.
Right. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Palash. So lesson here is that yes, while money might be like one of the biggest constraints that's stopping you from being a startup right after school, there are a lot of programs like the ones Palash just shared that can actually make life a little bit easier. So don't lose out on that dream or wait on the dream. Go for it. Good. Let's talk a little bit about Goldcast, about AI. You are trying to provide this platform that enables marketers and B2B marketers, especially like myself, drive engagement using video content. Can you
Right.
tell us a little bit more about Goldcast and especially with AI, what are you trying to do within the product?
Absolutely, Pratik. So let me set the context of like now, right? Why we think Goldcast is important right now. So in the last, I think 10, 15 years, you would know this better than anyone, right? That buying cycles have changed, right? So when I was at InMobi, just discovering products was so hard, right? The world of SaaS was so behind. We were using Excel for running like a 300 million revenue business. We didn't have Salesforce. It was that bad, right? In 2016. Now I think the level of awareness that a customer has increased a lot. What that really means is that when someone actually shows intent and has started giving out intent signals, they already probably know what they're going to buy. They have a short list. So the battle for pipeline has to happen before someone actually becomes pipeline when their dollars are not up for grabs, right? That's where their mind share is up for grabs. So that's the term we use. And video, all marketers know you are a living example of that, is the best way to get mind share, right? The challenge is that scaling video, especially as the company becomes bigger, is hard because it's the supply chain of sorts of different people doing different specialized things with different tools, right? So there's a workflow challenge there, there's a cost challenge there. And that's what we are trying to solve with Goldcast. We are building a video content platform that helps B2B marketers run their video content supply chain. In simple words, what it does is we help marketers create video content. So we have a tool like this, which helps you record high quality video content with your branding, local recording, all of that. We have a great product to run very nice, engaging, scaled up events and webinars programs. You can also put content from outside. So if you're doing in-person conferences, etc. And then we help you amplify that. Amplification means taking one long form content and extracting social worthy clips from it, editing them so that they're to post on social. That's a simple use case. A more complicated use case is that, for example, one of our customers, it's a public tech company, they just did their customer conference in SF and they had 200 hours of content from that in-person event. And they uploaded it on our platform and they can prompt it to say, hey, give me all the times I talked about AI in cybersecurity. And you find all those key moments that you can put together in a blog post. So like a multimodal blog post. Those kind of things are like genuinely very hard to do manually. And then you can distribute it on social media. You can host it on your website. So it's an end-to-end platform. Our value prop to marketers is that wherever your video content ends up, online events, websites, and social media, we'll help you move metrics there while reducing your cost and help you consolidate your tools and workflows. So that's the high level of what we are doing with Goldcast. The final thing is, which what makes this cool is that marketers do want to really build in AI in their workflows, right? So that's, I think, a given, right? And everyone wants to do that. As the company becomes bigger, it's insanely hard for them to keep up with the pace at which AI is moving, right? It's like so many point solutions coming out. And that's the ultimate problem we are solving. We want to be the conduit of all AI for them in video content and be the product that through which they experience AI in their video content workflows.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Palash. I have a couple of follow-up questions, two
Yeah.
slightly different areas, but the first part is more about creating differentiation and value for yourself. There are, in today's date, so many
Right.
tools. We are recording on a similar tool right
Right.
now. And as a marketer, I also keep getting bombarded with so many tools that keep coming up.
Right.
Because it's so easy to build something today, I'm not even getting into, what is the quality of the product.
Yeah.
But with AI, it's become so much easier to build tools like this that it's hard to, stand out and create some, top of mind in the mind of your buyers. What are you
Yes.
doing, or what are your learnings on how to create true differentiation and value?
Yeah. Great question, Pratik. And I'll give you a slightly longer-ish answer, but that will be the real answer, not the VC answer. It's like a founder answer. So the question we always ask is like differentiation for whom, right? And for us, we have a very clearly defined ICP, which is B2B companies with more than 500 employees. That's the ICP. We have many customers under 500 and we have a criteria to go after them, but that's like how we define our ICP. And when you get to that scale, you are typically doing something like this, right? You are recording stuff in some product. You are doing webinars in some product. You are doing virtual events in some product. You will likely have a video editor or a contractor agency who's using some tools. Or maybe if you are slightly forward looking, you are using one of the point solutions that you were talking about, right? That do video repurposing. And then you have something like a Vistia or a Brightcove or something to host. That's the landscape we end up in bigger companies. And so there's automatically a desire to consolidate and we can do all of it. So I think the claim and also the risk in our strategy is that we do all of it and we spend significant amount of engineering and R&D resources to do some of these things that are not like really AI first modern, but they will give us the right to innovate with AI over this because now we have an end-to-end platform. So there are very few like fully end-to-end things in the video stack. And the side is definitely one of them. They are coming more from the recording side. We are coming more from the webinar side. They are more stronger there. We are more strong. So that's one. The second differentiation that comes in, Pratik, in terms of just the product itself is just because we have the end-to-end, we will be better in a lot of things versus, say, someone who doesn't do end-to-end or who's a point solution. So there's a lot of innovation happening in repurposing, right? For example, Descript or there's another product called Opus. And the advantage that we have versus them is that we know everything about what happened when this content was getting created, right? So, for example, if you were doing this on Goldcast, you would know like who Palash is, who Pratik is, and we'll have descriptions and everything. And if it was a webinar, we know who the attendees were and everything. So our AI outputs are that much more better because we have context, and then you can also host it on Goldcast and then get analytics and then feed that back into your system to make it better. So now the challenge is that consolidating everything is also not something that everyone wants to do, right? Like some people are happy with point solutions, and I think 500 is where the threshold comes in. And above that, it's just too painful for people to deal with all of this. The second advantage is just go to market, right? Like selling to companies with more than 500 employees, especially when you get into enterprises, more than 2,000, that they cannot use point solutions. Like oftentimes just a PLG motion does not work for them if you're especially consolidating so many parts of the marketing workflow. So we have built that machine to do the go-to-market, right, of a classic SaaS, get the product adopted and set up. And I know that's not a differentiation people like think about as a differentiation, but it takes time, right? It's buildable. Everyone can build this, but it takes time. And we already have it in the right moment in the market. So those are two ways where we think our competitive advantage lies.
That's great, Palash. So on that note itself, right? And I know that I wanted to ask you a second question also, which is more in line
Yes.
with, Gen AI has made it easier to also build tools, and
Yeah.
many people are building tools that are sort of hacked together over a weekend or two.
Yes.
And some of them, they are making money, great, nothing wrong in it. But
Yes.
some of them are going to probably be very short lived. It's going to do well for a short period of time, and it's not going to probably be a real company. So,
Right.
From one founder to others who are listening, are there any signals or any advice that you can share on making sure that you're building a real company where
Yeah.
in today's world it might be very easy to get distracted by, oh, let's build this small thing or that small thing?
Yeah, great question. This is really a very unique time in the world of startups. I I'm going to make a LinkedIn post about it. It's already in my head about this very same topic. I think people think that building startups has become easier with AI, but in my head, it's almost become a little harder because coding ceased to be a bottleneck in building good startups way back. I don't think I have met any legit founders who were like, okay, I really had this amazing idea, but I could not code it. Unless you were building something like really, really path-breaking. These things were already improving. What was a bottleneck was like finding good ideas, right? Finding a market, a buyer who will actually pay for a problem to be solved. And I feel like because AI is becoming so powerful, a lot of those things are just getting like crunched. Like a lot of people can just do things on horizontal platforms, like a chat GPT, right? So the finding valuable problems to solve is in some ways also becoming harder, right? Right now there's a gold rush going on with like some very obvious problems to solve, right? Like coding was done by people, now we just have AI do very obvious problem statement. It's all execution based, right? And there's a lot in healthcare and recruiting, etc., which are just like automating manual workflows. I think those ideas probably are there for another 1.5 years. And that pool of like obvious ideas has not existed in SaaS, I think, for the last like 10 years. Very obvious ideas ceased to exist in SaaS since like 2017, 18, I guess. In that way, it's a good time, right? That where even young founders with less experience can just go and run faster and they can execute well and build great companies. Beyond that pool of ideas, I think it's becoming a little harder to do it. And the question people should ask is like whether like, it's a valuable problem to solve, right? Is someone willing to pay for it? And is someone willing to sign an annual contract? Like my parameter for B2B SaaS is like, is someone willing to sign an annual or a biannual contract? Because it's very easy to try something right
Yeah.
now with AI, but do you have a product that can actually drive retention and use it is my better.
That's
Okay.
amazing. And we talked a little bit about the whole idea generation part, and you had also shared early on that in
Yeah.
your days at Harvard, your co-founder were literally, you were okay to entertain every single idea that you had.
Right.
In your learning and experience, have you developed some kind of a model to test a hypothesis or an idea and that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely, Pratik. So, what I learned during my exploration was that there are like probably two or three things that matter the most. And that was because I was early on exploring a bunch of things in HR tech. Somehow we ended up there. So we spent a bunch of time there. And our realization was that ultimately, wherever we build, if we have to build a truly big company, it has to be a big market. Right? So that's number one. But there also has to be some tailwind in that market for a startup to enter. I don't subscribe to the ideology that great founders can make anything work. I think that's like more of a Twitter speak to just get people riled up. But I haven't seen that actually working in practice, right? So the market must be there and the tailwind must be there for the founder to succeed. And then it depends and the founder's job is then largely like finding that that's the most important skill and then executing on that, have a strategy to go after. So we started just with this checklist, right? Is there a big market? Is there a tailwind? And tailwind slightly more important than the current market size. So that's how we arrived at Goldcast because the tailwind was clear, right? As COVID was getting more stranger and there were lockdowns happening, it was obvious, right, that everyone needs an online events platform. What we were asking ourselves at that time was that is that a big market? And the answer to that was not an obvious yes, even though people thought it was an obvious yes at that time, because we knew that this is not going to last forever, right? People are not going to be doing online events forever. We are humans ultimately. But we did see a merit in using this as a wedge to get into a bigger problem statement. And to do that, we thought that we'll have to be very verticalized. We cannot be a super horizontal platform and also then build a lot more things for a super big horizon. That was just not going to happen. So that's why we focused on B2B at the time. So we were exploring 3 or 4 segments, like trade shows was one of them at the time. communities were hot at the time, so we were exploring that. And then we finally came to B2B because we thought there's longevity in this, and then the MarTech stack will fundamentally change as things progress. So that's how we arrived at the idea. It was kind of a circuitous journey. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'll ask you maybe one last question. And we were talking about this before some time back, remote work and culture. And I've had my share of challenges moving across geographies, trying to manage the team. You have a fair share of your team in the US, a fair share of your team in India. How are you sort of defining culture in the remote landscape so that everybody continues to stay pumped and excited about whatever you're building?
Yeah, that's a great question, Pratik, and I've made a lot of mistakes here. Lot of mistakes. So I am almost very open about my philosophy on how a workplace should be in today. And I think the best kind of setup is remote but not distributed. So you are probably in Bay Area, that's it, right? Or in Massachusetts, and people can be wherever, but we have to be able to come to office when there's a need. So maybe you come 2 times a week, right? And but if there's a QBR or if there's a fire, you should be able to come every day. So that's ideal. For us, that was not possible, and we had very, very good teammates across the globe. So we chose to go towards the second best option, which is we'll keep this, but we'll try to centralize in the 2 hubs that we have, Bangalore and Boston, as much as possible, and then get people to meet frequently. So we earmarked a budget that we were like, we will not touch this, even if the company achieves no goals it has set. We will invest in team-wise offsite. So we are saying, okay, every team gets to meet the other teammates twice a year, and you plan your offsites accordingly. And we then mix and match so that across teams can meet as well. So that's expensive, but we are saving money in office and everything else. So we are doing that. Now, coming to the culture part, what I realized was happening when people were not meeting is that there's a cultural drift that starts happening. And there's almost some kind of bitterness that starts developing in people when they don't meet each other. I think if you don't meet the person who you're talking with, there's a high chance that you might start assuming negative intent instead of assuming positive intent in like little things. So there's that kind of very subtle but long-term bitterness that starts developing if you are too isolated. So that is one challenge. The other thing which I have learned about culture, which is maybe somewhat related to remote, but is probably applicable to every company, and maybe more applicable for remote because it's hard to observe behaviors on a day-to-day basis, is defining values. And I got feedback on this from every founder that I spoke with before that, oh, you should have values in the company. And I was like, but yeah, I don't get it. Why? And so we had some values and we realized that we do hold some values here, but because we did not operationalize them at all, they were of no use. So they were just sitting in a doc that no one looked at, no one referred to. And the second thing was that because we did not operationalize them, we did not take action when those values were not being met. So that created a lot of like little challenges over time that we are now correcting. So now we have a set of values that we are very, very inner about. We are borderline maniacal about it now. And drive that change with the team and be serious about it. And the way we operationalize it is we like every spotlight that we give to others. So we have a concept of spotlight where people highlight the other person's contribution. We ask them to like call out what value is. Every all hands, I talk about them. We award people based on values. We ask people to come to HR if someone is not behaving in the right way with respect to values, or give them feedback. So there's a lot of those kind of checks and balances that we have built now. And it's more important to do in remote from day one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that so candidly, because that last part about value strikes with me as well. And I've done that mistake in my last startup as well. We had values defined, but never operationalized it. So it didn't really matter. It was something to put up on the about page or careers page. And that's about it, right? And when you are interviewing new folks, you're talking about it, right? But, in day-to-day activity, it never got operationalized. And on the other spectrum, I have seen and learned from companies like Amazon, who are also very maniacal about it. And people live, breathe the values. The entire interview process is based on the values and so on. Whereas I find that maybe a little towards the other extreme. But even then, I think they are a very good example of how do you get people to really imbibe the values, because it's been operationalized so well over the years that you
Yeah.
just cannot not witness it. You will get into
Yes.
it in your day to day, right? So,
Amazon is such a great example of that.
yeah. Any last pieces of advice for founders, especially, folks who are trying to build with AI integrations in their tools?
Yeah, definitely, Pratik. So when I talk to a lot of founders, like who want to start up, right? So there's a big pool of people who haven't started, who want to start up, but that pool is only growing with time. And there are a few things which I always tell them, that there's never a good time, right? When I was looking at starting up in 20, there were a bunch of things that were not conducive to starting up. And so there's always something that is not conducive to starting up. I feel like this is, despite of whatever, one of the best times to start up, just because there are so many obvious ideas that have opened up because of AI. But it's also challenging in the other ways we were talking about, right? That it might just be harder to find that longevity. So I think that the best time to start up is now, because there's never a good time. That's always my advice to people. And the second thing that I would say is, and which hasn't changed with AI or with COVID or with nothing, is having a great set of co-founders. Even I think a lot of people think that, oh, we'll explore ideas and then we will bring someone on, which does work, but it's always best to have someone in that exploration phase, because that forges a bond that is very likely to last, versus, say, making progress and then bringing someone in as a co-founder.
I know you found your co-founder at business school, but for folks who are looking, there's Y Combinator has this whole co-founder matching program, which is quite popular. But have you seen or heard from others what's worked for them in finding a co-founder?
Yeah. So one thing, the modalities that I've seen successful is, one, obviously school friends. Even if you're out of school, like just connecting with old friends is always helpful. Something like Y Combinator, On Deck is another one, right? Or Antler. Those are good places to find co-founders. Or even workplace, right? I think workplace is one place where you've already experimented working with
Yeah.
someone to know if your bandwidth matches with them or not. So if I had been in India, for example, then I would probably have started off with someone at InMobi, because I
Right.
had built a lot of relationships. I knew how to work with people there, and there was a lot of camaraderie between me and a lot of other people. So I guess that's it. But it's also like a process that takes time, and the best way to find someone is just to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
In every setting, you'll always find someone who raised their hand.
Thank you so much, Palash, for taking out time and sharing all of these amazing insights. So much value in this entire conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Radik. Thanks a lot.
And that wraps up today's episode. Before we sign off, I would like to thank you for your support and thanks for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Be kind, be happy, challenge the norm. I'll see you folks again for the next one.